Hello and welcome back to the Make Your Research Matter podcast, brought to you by Repo, the research repository for product teams that enhances research collaboration and makes direct connection between research and company goals. I'm your host, John Fontenot, and in today's episode, I have Haley Barger, a product manager in the e-commerce space, and we discuss her perspectives on research as a product manager and how you can reduce the chances of biased research, and practical tips for how to make your research resonate and matter more with internal stakeholders. You're in for a treat. Here's my conversation with Haley. Hey Haley, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, John. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you. So to kick things off, could you give the listeners an introduction of who you are and what you're up to?
Certainly. So I am currently a product manager in the e-commerce space. Been at that about 3 years. And prior to that, I have 6 or so years experience in project management. Transitioned to product because I love customers. I love interfacing with customers, making a more frictionless experience for them.
Awesome. So I'm curious before we dive into the research part of this, the transition from project management to product management. There's often debates online about like I'm not a project manager, I'm a product manager. Um, are there benefits that you had of coming from a project management background as you've made that transition into product?
Absolutely, John. So in my experience, others' experiences could be different, but in my experience, having that project management background has proved incredibly helpful. It's an essential skill, again, in my experience, to be able to juggle lots of balls, understand where all of the pieces are while they're moving, what's going on, and be able to answer at the drop of a hat and understand not just where we are with things, but where we're going with things, which obviously, as everybody knows, is kind of interdependent on where we are and where we've been. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I've noticed that too, and I've had really good product leaders that have said you're not a project manager, but you have to know how to do project management well to do your job well. And I agree with that.
Being able to influence others is a core skill of project management and obviously of product management as well. So while there is a distinction, there is a considerable amount of overlap, again, at least in my experience, between the two roles.
Absolutely. And so I think it's really interesting that like you're coming from the e-com space and like I'm really curious across different domains what research looks like and kind of what you're facing. So in general, like what's your take on research as a product manager? Is that something you do on your own? Is that something you own? Do you collaborate with a team on it? Like what does that look like for you?
Yes, I perform research on my own as a product manager, and I think, again, in my experience, in my opinion, that is a marker of the caliber of a product manager is, do you enjoy research? Do you want to know why something is happening? Do you want to know what a trend stems from or what preceded a trend? And so now what we're seeing, being able to understand that because you understand where we were before this happened, what transpired to make this happen. And so you can understand from that then more or less what might happen, how we should respond, how flexible do we need to be in real time. I think that's a core skill for every PM to have. And it's also one of the things that I really enjoy about my role. Working with others to research, yes, absolutely. We work with data science teams, UX teams. I'm sure that this is common for many PMs, is that you work with others to get more nuanced, in-depth understanding of research that you probably initiated yourself. Because we can't all be experts on everything, but we can be experts on knowing experts, right, as PMs. So knowing where to look, who to ask, having those relationships built when you need them, that's a core also, again, in my opinion and experience, that's a core PM skill as well. It's a form of influencing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. We don't have to know all the answers, but we have to know where to go get those answers and make sure that decisions get made. 100%.
That's right.
Cool. So you mentioned several things there, and there's a lot of directions that we could probably go. But you mentioned like looking at trends as a PM. Is that something that like do you focus more like of your time on like market level trends or like your existing customers and usage trends? Like what, I guess where do you spend most of your time in terms of research today?
I focus on customer wants and needs and how changes in the markets and changes, especially with changes in technology itself, how that is impacting, and more importantly, in my opinion, can or could impact customer wants and needs. So there's a bad experience, and a new technology is slowly emerging that could revolutionize this experience and make it so much better. But in order to integrate it into our roadmap, we have to start small, incremental build and testing now. Okay. You can't do that if you don't know what's going on. If you don't know about the technology, where is it coming from? Does it have use cases? Has it been tested? What are some companies? Are there any companies who've had success with it? Are there problems with the technology? What are those problems? Like, so all of these different facets of what could be or could not be a revolutionary, game changing technology for our customers, being able to recognize that and ask those questions, again, core PM skill. And I think if that's the direction that we want to go.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, right? Because you mentioned a lot of things there. Like I think one of the things that you didn't say specifically, but it was implied in how you were kind of personifying that approach to talking to customers is like drilling deep. I think that a lot of times PMs get into a research group where it's like question and answer. Here's a checklist of questions I want to ask you, and I'm just going to get through them, and okay, my research is done. But like what you were implying there was like you have to like parse out information and really like dive deep into like the customer journey, like what their experiences, and like not just take the service level answer. So, but what are things that you've learned along the way around like effectively interfacing with customers to really get those insights from them?
So thank you for bringing that up. I got a little bit lost in the sauce on my last answer because it was a big question with a big answer. I'm going to take a step back and talk about bias for a second.
Okay.
Um, I have seen at every organization I've ever worked that some researchers approach research with a bias. Um, and when you approach research with a bias by asking very, very targeted questions, the way that you structure your questions is the structure of your answers. So if you are only asking extremely targeted questions about an issue or a problem or something that you'd like to just know more about from your customers, while they might veer off periodically, as we are all want to do, um, they are mostly going to answer the specific questions that you asked and nothing else. And so when you target it that way and are so specific, there's a bias in your data. And so your data is not truly representative of the answers for the questions that you wanted to actually ask because you were too specific. Um, so if you want to go ahead and move forward and ask that question again that you, that you asked me.
No, no, I think this is a great thread. Like let's stay on this thread because I think it'll dovetail nicely into what I did ask.
Okay.
But it's funny because you mentioned data science a second ago, so I'm gonna rabbit trail for a second and then come back.
Right.
But data scientists I've worked with are like, you know, our models are only as good as the data we have. Garbage in, garbage out. And like what you're pointing to is
That's
like
right.
the qualitative version of that, where it's like the questions you ask, if it's garbage in, you're gonna get garbage insights back. And so kind of staying on
That's
that
right.
thread of like bias, how do you like as you're preparing to talk to customers? I think sometimes we get lazy and we like don't actually prepare for those conversations. But as you're preparing, what are some things that you've found or done that has helped you to eliminate bias and ask better questions so it's, you know, gold in, gold out kind of thing?
Right. So I tend to lean on questions about user behavior, customer behavior, because I don't want to know, do they like this feature or not? Why do they like this feature or not? Because asking that kind of question at that more granular level of just a feature rather than how are you using this? Why do you use it that way? And understanding that full journey, that will get you much cleaner, obviously a broader data set, but a cleaner qualitative data set than will asking much more specific questions about a singular feature in a more granular way. Although obviously sometimes when you're studying a singular feature, I think it helps to contextualize it in that larger journey, even when you're posing questions to customers, because you'll get your answers about that feature. When you contextualize it that way, it will make it easier for the customer to understand during the interview and research process. And the data that you'll get back will give you a much better picture of not only the user journey and how that feature fits within it, but also what the problems, where they're coming from, what the problems are and where they're coming from within that journey. Because when you're not as granular, again, you get back data as part of that broader data set that you may not have expected, but it could, and in my experience, fairly often it is important stuff that you wouldn't have gotten if you hadn't have asked a broader sort of question the way that you did. So that's my approach on how to deal with that. And the data scientists are absolutely right. It's this same, it applies to qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah, for sure. And so what you said there, right, is like you want to make sure that you start broader, because even if you have something very specific, or like it's truly you're trying to get feedback on like one specific feature, it's like that feature isn't the product. It works within the system of the product as a
Correct.
whole, and you have to understand
Correct.
like from the standpoint of how does it fit into the larger workflow of the user, for it to make any sense at all, versus because then otherwise, to your point, you're just stuck with, do you like this feature? Cool, thanks for talking to me. Here's your Amazon gift card. Yeah,
Getting to the why, which I think kind of ties back to the question that I didn't necessarily answer a little bit ways back. The most important thing that we can know and continually search for, because it might change and probably will change, maybe even several times, as you're with an organization as a PM, is why. Um, I know that there's a lot of buzz about this concept of why in our profession. There has been for a couple of years now, I think, and going back even further, but there's been a big emphasis on finding the why of late. Um, and I wonder a lot in talking with other PMs, in my job or at networking events, how the why is being defined in different organizations. Because to me, the why is not why does a customer do this one thing, or why does a customer see a feature this way, but it's why is the customer using our product? What is our product? What is attracting them to it? Why are they drawn to it? Why are they having issues with it? And from that why, we can then discern. So originally, I used to be a reporter for newspapers, and in journalism school, they teach you on the very first day the 5 W's and an H. So who, what, when, where, why, and how. Why leads to the other answers. So if you start with that, in logic class, they always told us if your premise is false, your answer will be false. So if your premise is why, and your other 4 W's and your H are defined for you through that lens, then your outcome, your output will be correct because your premise was correct and accurate. You began in the right direction, so you're going to go the right direction and arrive at the correct destination.
such a good insight, and such an interesting like perspective on the whole start with why, because I think you're right with like Simon Sinek and with others who kind of popularized this. Also, like I think it's Josh Seiden, I probably butchered his last name, but had the book Outcomes Over Outputs. It's like, why are you doing what you're doing? It's not just shipping features, but it's the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And I really like that around starting with something that's like logically sound, starting with a why to
Yep.
lead to all the other variables. I think that makes a ton of sense. So in your experience, Haley, like as you've executed on research in different roles, like what's been like the biggest challenge that you've faced?
A huge challenge, and I feel comfortable being transparent about this. Um, it's a little bit of a spicy take, perhaps, but it's something that is definitely talked about privately among PMs, and it's been talked about at every organization I've ever been a part of, even before I was a PM. But oftentimes, research again will come back with data and outcomes that you did not expect, and packaging those results and what the implications could be for change to a product or change within an organization can be controversial. I think that it can become an obstacle or it can become a boon, right? So change can be positive or change can affect an organization negatively. And it's really about how we approach it. When we get data back that says, actually, this is really not going well. We spent money to do X thing, and X thing is not well received, despite all of our best efforts, despite our incredible designers, despite the research that we put into this, despite the frictionless interface that was developed quickly, like in record time. Customers don't like it. And delivering those results in a way that is empathetic and poised and ready to position for what's next, I think is a challenge that every PM faces, and it doesn't matter the organization.
Yeah, it's like you go through this trouble to get the data, to get the feedback on what you've done, and you're expecting, at least to some degree, you're expecting it to be positive. You put all this work and blood, sweat, and
Yeah.
tears into there's this emotional energy invested into it, and it comes back, and it's like, oh man, we really fell short here. And I'm curious, like, because this happens a lot, right? Where
Right.
like there's pressure to ship and there's pressure to drive business outcomes, and like inevitably we almost get forced into this world where like we're having to ship outputs, and I feel like sometimes we don't get the space or the time to do that upfront validation work of like, is this desirable, is this valuable, before we actually spend the dev cycles to get it out there. Like what has been your experience with that?
My experience with that has been, and it's going to come with a small spicy take and a small spicy tip. So, if you find yourself in an organization that's being pushed to rapid ship without a lot of upfront research and very, very little testing, and one day you find that one or more things that you've shipped recently are causing dips or lags, or worse, I would suggest, and this is why it's spicy, I would suggest that you package all that up. You gather that data, you package it up, and you go to those leaders above you, um, and you go in domino order and say, hey, I just want to bring this to your attention, because it is of concern, it's emergent, and I want to escalate it because our product, the integrity of our product, um, it seems to be coming into question. And I think that there's a remedy to this. And I think that remediation should start with research and upfront validation because this is fixable. Our customers are our customers for a reason. And this is a bump in the road. It doesn't have to define this product. It doesn't have to define us. Our integrity is not lost. but we need to put some work in when we didn't put the work in earlier. That's the fix to this. And I think that take is spicy because I'll be honest, I've seen mixed results to that. But during the times I will say when it was positively received, it had massive impacts. It was worth saying something. So if you're a PM and you're afraid to say something, obviously, you know your organization best, you know yourself best, you know your team best. Think it over. But the times when it works are worth it. Like those are the moments when you say to yourself, I remember why I love being a PM so much. This is why I got into this profession for real.
No, for sure. And if I can kick up the spicy meter from jalapeno to ghost pepper just a little bit.
Okay. All right.
If you're in an organization that doesn't receive it well, whenever you provide that feedback with the best interest of the company and your product in mind, might not be the best place to stick around.
John, I second that. I absolutely second that. If you find yourself in that situation, just know that your experiences are growing you as a professional and as a person. All of the things that you are taking in right now are valuable experiences that are going to shape how you proceed forward. And how you proceed forward is always your choice. But keep an eye out on your surroundings. Look around you. Look at what consequences. My mother always says, actions have consequences. So look
They
around
always
you
do.
and look for consequences, positive and negative, and make decisions about your own growth and where you might go next based on that data that you've taken.
Yep.
Life
Completely
is
agree.
research.
So that I think it's interesting, right? So let's move down the path of like you've given this feedback to leadership and they've accepted it positively, right? What have you seen done or what have you done to say, okay, they're giving me the space to do this upfront research. How can I like reinforce or um, continue to build the credibility and confidence that this is actually doing what I said it should
Yep.
set out to do? Like, how do you go about um, continuing to build that confidence with your senior leaders?
Absolutely. So this is one of those times, and I'm a big fan of this in general, but over communicating. And over communicating in a way, you have to think about your audience, right? So your audience has a million things going on. They probably have a meeting on their laptop and a meeting on their iPad and a different meeting on their phone right now. And they're reading something maybe from you while these three meetings are going on. And that's all day into the night, all the time. They want to see this is what's going on. This is the good. This is the bad. This is what we're doing about it. This is what this is going to lead to in a very, very abbreviated, clear format. This is why it matters. This is what's going on. I would encourage sharing that with them as you do further research, as you test, as you continue to speak with customers, and allow them to see through that window what you're finding and their excitement about what you found. This is great. Let's move on this, or let's fix this. As you do that, as you move forward, as you fix or as you innovate, show them not just how you're doing it, but what impact it's having, both incrementally and in the bigger picture, because they're going to want to know the bigger picture first and foremost. But those incremental snapshots, that's really important to maintain stakeholder confidence, at least in my experience. They want to know, is their investment growing, and is their investment both in you, in the product, and probably like fiscal investment for the cost of the work and the labor and all that. They're going to want to know, what's my ROI on this? And that can answer that question for them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Like they want to be able to tie A to Z of I gave them the space to do this. Am I getting the return? And like I'm curious from your perspective, like have you found certain artifacts or like something tangible that has worked particularly well with leaders that like resonates with them or that they gravitate towards to draw that connection?
You know, another thing my mother often says is that humans are visual creatures. Okay. So everybody loves a good infographic, a good simple infographic. It doesn't have to be a chart. It doesn't have to be a graph necessarily. Maybe it's a 5-second demo clip. A demo clip so micro that you don't need to do a formal demo meeting, but just showing them the progress or showing them a video clip from, obviously with consent, but from a customer talking about in this test, this is how having this versus not having this is how it impacted me as a customer. Or even showing them user video of during the test with the feature and the impacts that it had in real time. I've found any kind of visual, but especially those sort of snippets to be very valuable because the ROI is like readily apparent. They'll not only have the text, the bullets of what you're delivering and what the ROI is that way, but they'll be able to draw that human connection with our customers, which is that's at the basis of everything we do as PMs, right? Is the
Yeah.
connection, the human to human connection, empathy and understanding. I mean, that's what it's all about. And that's what that kind of communication brings to senior level stakeholders.
I've seen the exact same thing, Haley, where like I could put quotes in text form or I could like do an executive summary and it's like it's good. But as soon as you put a video clip or like a compilation of like little
Yeah.
clips of like a certain point that you're trying to reinforce, it becomes so much more real because it's a real person. It's not text on a page or a PowerPoint. And it happened this morning. Like I'm getting feedback that a sales team on one of the products I'm working on is doubting that it's marketable, right? And then I get on the call with this customer, and they're like, "Oh man, if you can do this, this would be game changing." And it's like one of our bigger customers, and so it's like, okay,
Yeah.
there's dissonance in between like our company beliefs and what the market believes, and so we have to make those things come together so we can create that excitement. So I think you're spot on.
I love that. Especially that last part where you talked about market and company. I think that living in the valley as PMs between those two mountains, um, we see a lot. What happens in valleys? A lot of growth. That's where fertile soil is in the valleys. But it's also where floods can happen or landslides can happen. And so in the fertile valley, living at the crux between those two mountains, what we do with that life that we've built in the valley is what the folks on the mountaintops look down and see. And so being able to show them in that very tangible human way what's going on down in the valley, I think that that's critical and it really can't be understated the importance of thinking of it through that lens of human to human.
And I can't understate how, on so many levels, that analogy was incredibly powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Thank
That
you.
was awesome.
I come from a valley between two mountains, so I know a lot about that.
Gotcha. That's cool. No, so Haley, I really appreciate this conversation and your time today. As we wrap up, I'm just curious, like, are there other like one or two more tips that you may have for the listeners around how we can really make our research matter more?
I would say I'm going to take a step way, way back to the beginning of the conversation. Research to listening to research matter more. What makes research matter more? The thing that makes research matter most, the two things actually, are the customers, because they are the why. And then what is their why behind their wants and needs and what are their frustrations. And so understanding not only why are we here, but why are they here and why are they saying what they're doing? Scaling out infinitely forever. Why? Always asking that. Um, And then I have a kind of low-key, I'm not sure how much you'll cut from this, but I kind of have, my dad was a professor for many, many years, and he loved research, and he published like extensively, and it really showed how much he loved research. He had like 20 scholarly books or something. And he always said that research is the most fun that you can have with your clothes on. And I'm really, really inclined to agree with him, because if you're a person who, when you look at a situation, your first question is, why? Why is it like this? Why is this happening? Why is it good? Why is it bad? Why am I seeing what I'm seeing? Research is how you're going to figure that out. And it leads you to interact with so many different individuals and groups of people that you may not have interacted with if you hadn't asked that question, because they're probably interested in the question too. And they probably know from a different perspective the answer that you're looking for. And so by interacting with all those different individuals, you get such a rich, broad, and yet deep sort of understanding of the subject that you're researching. So beyond why, you'll understand precedent, you'll understand innovation, you'll understand potentiality. And I think understanding, again, first that why, and then remember that you're supposed to have fun with this. It should be fun. Growth and innovation come from asking why and from understanding and enjoying that process of figuring all that out. I mean, I don't know a PM, a single one, who doesn't enjoy that, but I think that it can be hard for us. I also don't know a single PM who isn't a really hard worker and who isn't really dedicated. And I think that sometimes we can get really, really caught up in just getting through it, wading through the day, going to meetings, and working with customers, and that's our bright spot. But going to a lot of meetings, looking at roadmaps, looking at data, and sitting alone in ourselves. And we can forget why we came, but we can't forget why we came. Why we got into this. It's for us and for the customer and for the sake of knowing.
I love your point of having fun, and it should be fun, and it is exciting. Like to your dad's point, there's quite the high you get whenever you get a juicy insight from a customer. Like I run upstairs, skip around the house, high five my wife, and like I'm not even kidding. Like I get pretty jazzed after a really cool research call.
And I sit at the desk and pump my fist, John.
I do the Tiger Woods fist bump too. Don't worry. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Really appreciate it. But to the point of have fun, right? I think a lot of like newer PMs or PMs that haven't understood the value of research get a little intimidated of talking to customers because it's new. And to your point, like they want us to help them. They want to talk to us. And in some organizations, PMs aren't allowed to talk to customers, but it should be fun. If you're tired of duplicative research efforts or losing research files from customer interviews and the endless mess of poorly organized files and folders, check out Repo, the #1 research repository for software companies who want to make their research matter. Research shouldn't be siloed between departments. It should be accessible broadly throughout your organization. If you and your company can benefit from alignment on strategy, prioritization, and decision-making, try out Repo at researchrepo.com. Link in the show notes.